The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Cut. Cut is a peer-to-peer social betting platform that's US-based and available in 40 states. Head to cut.com, that's KUTC.com, and use promo code SGPN for a 10% deposit bonus. We're also brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. Play their fantasy pick'em for a chance to win 100 times your money in NBA, NHL, college basketball, and more. Sign up today using promo code SGPN to get a 100% deposit match. We're also brought to you by the SGPN subscriber-only March Madness Bankroll Challenge. Free to enter and up to $2,000 in prizes. Enter today at sportscampodcast.com/madness. We're also brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets, the sports fan research platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Download the app or visit hofbets.com. Use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month and start making smarter bets today. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently early Tuesday morning, March 19th, and I'm your host, always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be an interesting episode because it is time to actually not give out any picks, but to recap what happened over the last couple of weeks in Indian Wells as Alcaraz got the job done and won his first title since winning Wimbledon all the way back in midway through last year. Point is, though, I have to first explain what exactly happened to the podcast for the last week or two, because my initial plan was to do an episode for every round. Then we had no episodes at all for the entire tournament. So for starters, I got to address the question, where have I been? I ended up going to Florida to see some family. That was not the issue, though. That was nice. The problem was, while I was in Florida, I got COVID again for the fourth time. The fourth time that I got COVID, so I was not able to really talk that much. I was able to co-host a couple of podcasts because I was able to take some vocal breaks, just, having somebody else talk while I could kind of get some water and try to reset. But unfortunately, with the tennis podcast, with me being by myself, talking for 30 minutes in a row, my throat was not going to cooperate, so I was not able to do so. So as a result, I had to put the podcast temporarily on hold, and because of that, we had no episodes for the last 2 weeks. Having said that, we did have a YouTube video that ended up getting posted for the final between Alcaraz and Medvedev. So if you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple, a reminder, don't forget to rate and review. Also, though, a reminder, we are doing the episodes on YouTube as well. So if you are joining us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. But either way, the point is, though, if you are only listening to this podcast on Spotify or Apple, you probably didn't know that I posted a YouTube video with my picks for the final between Alcaraz and Medvedev, and we ended up picking up a nice winner. We had a best bet. We gave it Alcaraz minus 2.5 games at minus 138, and that got there as Alcaraz won the first set in a tough tiebreak and then immediately destroyed Medvedev in the second set. So entering this podcast off of a win, which is nice, but apologies if you did not see it on YouTube because you only consume the podcast via Spotify or Apple. So I wanted to mention that. Also a reminder, while I still have all of you here, don't forget to check out the merch store for the Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. So if you want to buy a shirt, you want to buy a mug, etc., we do have some merchandise for you. Now, I already addressed why we did not have any episodes, but I feel like I still owe it to all of you to at least discuss my takeaways from Indian Wells, both from an actual match perspective, as well as a storyline perspective, and maybe even just an overall opinion of the tournament itself. So starting off with the actual winner of the event, I mentioned before, Alcaraz won his first title since Wimbledon. Kind of a weird tournament because you saw a bunch of upsets, a bunch of surprises, and yet we ended up with the exact same final that we had last year, as Alcaraz took on Medvedev for the second straight year, and Alcaraz won in straight sets for the second straight year. Now I'm going to get back to Alcaraz and his win against Medvedev in particular in a second. I'm going to save that for the end of the recap. I'm going to go in chronological order. So starting off with the bad news, he had a couple of injuries. First of all, Nadal. Now, Nadal ended up withdrawing before his first round match against Raonic. I said just watching the Netflix Slam, just by watching it, that if you bet on Nadal to win anything in this event, it was a monumental waste of money. It turns out I was wrong because you did not waste any money because luckily for you, he ended up quitting before any matches were played, so you did get your money back. Now, I mentioned before, I thought that the odds for Nadal were absurd. I thought he was clearly not healthy, and I thought that Alcaraz carried the entire Netflix Slam because he was trying at about 30% because he knew Nadal couldn't move, and apparently my overall read on that match was correct because Nadal was definitely injured, and could not compete at an ATP level, which is why Nadal ended up withdrawing before any matches were completed. And the problem with that is that Raonic was his opponent in the first round, who ended up beating Nagal. So you had Nagal replacing Nadal, and Raonic beat him in straight sets, and then did not play again because Raonic once again got injured. It sucks. It keeps happening. But at some point, I don't want to fully turn it on Raonic because I know he's had a pretty successful career, and unfortunately, injuries derailed it. At some point, if you're not able to actually physically complete multiple matches in a row, I don't know if you can prevent him from joining tournaments or what the story is going to be, but Raonic has been in multiple events and he's had to retire or withdraw after winning matches. And at some point, it's not worth it for him or for the actual, I'd say, tournament director to accept him if he's going to get injured after winning matches and you're going to have walkovers in the later round. So it's kind of interesting, and we'll see what happens with Raonic moving forward. Physically, though, he has not been able to fully keep it together, and that sucks. But it is what it is, and Raonic did get injured as he ended up having to forfeit his spot in the tournament right before his matchup against Rune in the second round. Now, that is going to basically do it for the injury. Shevchenko also got injured in his, I believe it was first round match. But either way, I have to start off with the biggest upset that we've had in tennis for a while. I'd say it's probably a bigger upset than Morozin beating Alcaraz last year. But Djokovic ended up beating Vukic in straight sets. In three. It was not easy at all. Ended up winning that one 6-2, 5-7, 6-3. Then he had a matchup against a lucky loser in Nardi, and he lost. Djokovic was around minus 8,000 on the money line, give or take, depending on where you were shopping, and he ended up losing in 3 to Nardi. Did lose the first set by the score of 6-4. Then he came back and won the second set 6-3, and you assume that Djokovic kind of gained control of the match again, but he did not, as Nardi got a break, and he ended up holding on to win 6-3. Main takeaways from that match in general were Djokovic just not looking sharp physically. It seemed like the movement, especially to the backhand side, was not very fluid. And it seemed like, besides the unforced error count, Djokovic's footwork and overall, I just thought mobility seemed quite compromised. And I feel like that was where Nardi was able to capitalize and where Nardi was able to find success in some of the longer rallies. Just moving a Djokovic laterally side to side was giving him problems, and Nardi definitely capitalized on that. So Djokovic winning in 3 against Vukic was a bit of a shock because everyone expected him to win in straight sets. He was a massive favorite to win in straight sets, but you could argue Djokovic had not played in a while, so maybe rust was a factor. It was not rust. Djokovic was definitely compromised, or at least he appeared to be somewhat limited physically with the movement, and Nardi did get the job done. Not taking anything away from Nardi. At the end of the day, you still pulled off a massive upset, still got a nice win, and I want to give Nardi his flowers, but I have to at least mention Djokovic did not seem right physically, and that was definitely the case after the match because Djokovic officially withdrew from ATP Miami. So you had the Masters 1000 event in Indian Wells right into the Masters 1000 event in Miami, and Djokovic decided that he was physically not fit to participate in Miami. So definitely the lack of proper movement was an issue. Djokovic acknowledges it, and based on where he's at in his career, he's definitely focused pretty much solely on Grand Slam titles, and he's going to try to find his way back for the French Open. Now, I'm not going to hit the panic button for Djokovic. Yes, it's an embarrassing loss. It happens. We saw Alcaraz once again lose to Morozin last year. We've seen some big shocks before, so it's not exactly unheard of for a player to lose and then it'll potentially rebound and look fine moving forward. But you have to at least point out that Djokovic has struggled so far this year compared to his insane standards because he lost in Australia in the tournament that he owns in the Australian Open, and then he lost the Masters 1000 event. So I think Djokovic, once again, has a long way to go in the rest of the calendar season. I'm not going to stick a fork in him. He's not done. I'm not going to overreact, but I am going to say it has been a relatively underwhelming start to the season for the greatest player of all time. And we'll see if it is age or if it's just a bit of, I'd say, I don't want to say fluky circumstances or a bit of just running into good competition or just not being fully up to task physically. Point is, Djokovic is going to have to play better moving forward, and hopefully he does so. But either way, wanted to mention that he officially lost to a lucky loser and then withdrew from the following tournament. And it's a Masters 1000 event, which is a big deal with a decent amount of prize money. So Djokovic clearly is not feeling close to 100%. Now, as for the rest of the actual tournament, I'm going to get into the final match in a second between Alcaraz and Medvedev. I'll get into some of the other guys who made deep runs in this event as well. Before we get into any of that, I do want to take a quick word from our sponsor. We're brought to you by Merch Madness. 15% off everything in the merch store, promo code Madness. So if you are looking for some Tennis Scaling Podcast and merch, we have shirts available on the actual merch store, and you can definitely get a couple of them with a nice discount because you get 15% off everything in the merch store once again with the promo code Madness. We're also brought to you by the SGPN subscriber-only March Madness contest. This contest is free to enter and only open to subscribers of SGPN shows. For every SGPN show you're subscribed to, you'll get bonus credits to use in the contest. It's a bankroll-style contest and a winner-take-all actual prize format for a $1,000 prize or $2,000 if you're subscribed to the Sports Game Podcast Patreon. Go to sportsgamepodcast.com/madness, sportsgamepodcast.com/madness. We're also brought to you by Cut. Cut is a peer-to-peer social betting platform that's US-based and available in 40 states. Peer-to-peer social betting is a new and better way to bet directly against your friends or other users on sports, politics, pop culture, and other events with verifiable outcomes, plus a ton of social features that give it the feel of a betting social network. Cut offers lower vig and fully customizable odds so you can create your own bets. Cut handles the payment side of things, so you never have to worry about chasing down your money. Social features include group chats, betting leaderboards, head-to-head history, user profiles, fan groups, and more. And they also have great rewards. Get cash back every single time you bet against your friends or other users. So download Cut today in the App Store or over at cut.com. That's KUTT, and use promo code SGPN for a 10% deposit bonus. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the place to play fantasy sports because it is the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. They have great pick'em games. For example, you can pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in their upcoming games. You can win up to 100 times your money in a single night. Pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry, and you can also make rivals picks, which pits 2 players against each other, so you can pick which player you think might have more points, for example, in an NBA game. But a reminder that you should also join Underdog Fantasy because they have a lot of very fun markets for tennis. They have, for example, breaks of serve, they have aces, they have a lot of fun tennis options to make matches more interesting, and I recommend you joining the platform in order to take advantage of those opportunities. So sign up today with promo code SGPN to get your first deposit doubled up to $100, as well as an instant pick'em special. Visit underdogfantasy.com or find them on the App Store, and don't forget to register with the promo code SGPN to get your first deposit doubled up to $100, as well as an instant pick'em special. Must be 18 plus and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concern with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Scaling Podcast. Just finished the early part of the tournament, recap-wise, for Indian Wells. Now it is time to continue our actual recap. So moving on to the next thing I want to talk about, which was a deep run by an American, which fell pretty short. Now it's going to segue from what we talked about with Djokovic because he lost to Nardi. Nardi's Cinderella run did not last much longer because he got absolutely buried by Tommy Paul, as Paul did win 6-4, 6-3. Paul had a great run. Ended up beating Mickelson in straight sets, beat Humbert in straight sets, beat Nardi in straight sets, and then he ended up beating Ruud in 3. Unfortunately, though, the road did come to an end in heartbreaking fashion as Paul did lose to Medvedev in 3 sets. I swear it feels like every Tommy Paul match is loss, I should say, is extremely painful. And it seems like he always falls short in some step-up matches, per se. I know he had a win or two against Alcaraz last year. You get my point, though. Paul does seem to always find himself on the short end of the stick in some very competitive matches against top 5, top 10 guys, and this was no exception because Paul was looking very sharp against Medvedev as he won the first set 6-1, And you thought, okay, maybe Paul can actually do something. Then he was kind of getting buried in the second set, but he did rally and eventually found himself in a tiebreak. And it seemed like it was going to potentially be a straight set victory for Paul. Then he rolled his ankle on a crazy point, and after he rolled his ankle, the match kind of flipped on its head, and Medvedev dominated from that point forward. I don't believe Medvedev lost a point in the breaker after Tommy Paul rolled his ankle, and then after that, Medvedev did dominate the final set as he won 6-2. So Paul had a great run, beat Ruud, top 10 win there, good for him. Beat Humbert, good win for him. He was in a very, very just overall good form, and he was in the middle of a great tournament. And then one ankle roll kind of changed his entire trajectory, and he ended up falling short to Medvedev. So that's unfortunate for Paul. I got to mention it, though, and hopefully Paul can bounce back. But Paul did definitely showcase a lot of talent with the serve and volley game, and he was willing to use it against Medvedev and against Ruud in particular, who stand very far back on the court. So keep an eye out moving forward for Paul using the net game a bit more, because that is a pretty underrated aspect of his game. And I wanted to give him props for a respectable run, but unfortunately, all of his losses are basically the same, and he lost in the most painful manner possible. Now, I have to mention what else happened in the latter stages of this event, because you had Sinner, who was undefeated in 2024, and then he faced off against Alcaraz. Now, the match itself was pretty weird because you had a weather delay early on, and you ended up seeing Sinner dominate the first set against Alcaraz, as Sinner did win the first set. I believe it was 6-1, if I'm not mistaken. And then after that, everything kind of fell apart as you saw Sinner kind of tweak it, I'd say stretching out the ankle a bit, as he ended up being a little bit injured, at least according to the actual announcers. I didn't see much physically in terms of movement being compromised, but it did seem like it was bothering him. Then he had the crazy dive attempt on that drop shot by Alcaraz, and he kind of messed up his wrist a little bit, kept playing. I'm not going to completely ignore all of Alcaraz's impressive play in that match, but I am going to at least mention that Sinner did seem to get a little bit nicked up during the actual match itself. Alcaraz was the better player, though, and Alcaraz did wear Sinner down. So, yes, there were some injuries involved. I really don't care. It's part of the sport. Alcaraz did win. It was a much-needed win, and either way, Alcaraz did get the job done pretty convincingly in the final two sets. Besides that, you had a couple of interesting weather situations or just court situations involving the actual playing conditions, because weather was an issue. You had rain for multiple days, which completely destroyed the overall tournament schedule, which is always annoying, but that ended up happening. You also had a bee delay in the Zverev and Alcaraz match, where you had a bunch of bees on the court. Apparently, Alcaraz is afraid of bees, but either way, he didn't want to be out there. Makes sense. You had a swarm of them, and instead of having to postpone the match for a day or two, it was only about an hour and change that was taken care of, and then Alcaraz ended up burying Zverev as he ended up winning that one 6-3, 6-1. Absolute destruction, but either way, point is Alcaraz did a pretty convincing job of taking care of business against Zverev and then doing so in the final two sets against Sinner before eventually taking on Medvedev in the final. But Alcaraz only dropped, I believe it was one set in the first couple rounds, as he ended up losing the first set to Arnaldi, and then he won the next two sets 6-0, 6-1. Then he ended up beating Felix. Then he ended up beating Morozin, and then he ended up beating Zverev all in straight sets. Then he dropped the set against Sinner, but then responded well and won the next two sets comfortably. And then he had the matchup against Medvedev, where he was struggling early. He went down 3-0 immediately, and then he ended up coming back to win the first set via tiebreak. And then Medvedev at that point got broken immediately. It felt like he kind of mentally checked out. The crowd support was all in favor of Alcaraz, which seemed to kind of annoy Medvedev. And Alcaraz got the job done as he won the second set very, very comfortably en route to a title. Now, Alcaraz ended up winning officially by the scoreline of 7-6, 6-1. We gave it Alcaraz minus the games. I even mentioned Alcaraz in straight sets in that Medvedev match. Kind of went the way that I thought it would. I just thought that Medvedev showed a pretty, I'd say, glaring flaw in his game in that Paul match, and I thought Alcaraz would capitalize. And that was the second serve, because Medvedev's second serve got absolutely destroyed by Paul, who was very aggressive against it, and Alcaraz did the same thing. And that was really the story of the match. Alcaraz's second serve win percentage was much higher than Medvedev's, and that was how Alcaraz picked up a bunch of free points and why he was able to kind of dominate the entire second set. Now, as for the actual, I'd say, reasons why I took Alcaraz over Medvedev, I thought Alcaraz did enough to kind of prove to me that he was back in good form. We know that he was having a bit of a tough time after Wimbledon, where he was struggling either physically or mentally, adjusting to some opponents mid-match. And he had Ferrero, who was there again as his coach, and that definitely helped out because Ferrero, we know, has been a very, very key piece to the Alcaraz explosion and the Alcaraz, I'd say just the Alcaraz surge that we've seen for the last couple of years. And it does seem like Ferrero being there is kind of a must for Alcaraz moving forward. And I do think if Ferrero is not in attendance, Alcaraz power ranking wise does get moved down a little bit, in my opinion. I'm not saying that Alcaraz cannot win without Ferrero, but I am saying based on the critiques that I've had against Alcaraz in the past, I still question his overall, I'd say, adjustment making process in the course of matches, as well as the shot selection. And Ferrero is a very solid tennis mind. So Ferrero is able to give Alcaraz pointers or maybe just tell him exactly what to do. And that is a very invaluable piece of, I'd say, just information that Alcaraz can use in order to win matches. And it seemed like Alcaraz did a good job of making adjustments for the sake of this event. But for the most part, he kind of coasted, with the exception of the first set against Arnaldi, as well as the first set against Sinner. As for Medvedev, not really much more to add. Medvedev's second serve was a problem, and that was exploited in the last couple of matches in this event. But either way, I know Medvedev beat him in the U.S. Open last year. Surprised some people, I get it. Alcaraz is a better player than Medvedev. It is what it is. Alcaraz is more talented. I think he's got more variety, and the second serve for Medvedev was really the problem, and Alcaraz was able to jump all over it en route to winning the event. Now, I'm trying to think of anything else that is actually worth talking about for this event. So before we I'm going to actually kind of rant about Indian Wells in a second. Before we get into any of that, do want to quickly take one more word from our sponsor. We're brought to you by Game Time. I don't know about all of you, but I personally love attending sport events in person. It used to be very annoying to actually find a ticketing platform that I could trust, but that changed once I found Game Time, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They have great last-minute deals on tickets, and their best price guarantee means you can stop stressing over the tickets, and you can start getting hyped over the fun that you're going to have. My favorite feature is going to definitely be the images of seat views, which is very, very useful for me, because maybe you've had an experience like this where you have bought a ticket to a sporting event, and you ended up finding your seats, and you realize that there's a pole or an obstruction in your line of view. So you paid a lot of your hard-earned money, and you're not able to see anything that you actually paid to see. So that's not going to happen with Game Time, because they will show you the image of the view you're going to get before you actually spend money. So you'll always get a good view of the action. Plus, Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget plenty months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So sign up tickets without the stress. With Game Time, download the app and create an account and use the code CFBX for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CFBX for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're also brought to you by Champs. Champs is hosting a free March Madness bracket contest for a chance to win $1,000. Plus, if you host your own March Madness pool on Champs, you'll get an extra free entry into the bracket contest. Tiebreakers are determined by whoever enters first. So make sure you register now so you don't miss out. Head to sportsgamepodcast.com/champs, sportsgamepodcast.com/champs. We're also brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets. Win bigger betting smarter this NBA season with Hall of Fame Bets. Sports Analytics platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Research every NBA and soccer bet with historical stats and data. Enter any parlay idea into Hall of Fame Bets' revolutionary optimizer tool to get hit rates broken down by leg, as well as an expected probability for the entire parlay. Sort all players by hit rate for any bet to learn which players are hot and which picks have value. Stop betting in the dark and join over 30,000 users researching with Hall of Fame Bets to craft more intelligent, data-driven parlays. Download the app at HOPETS.com. Use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month today. Start researching, start winning with Hall of Fame Bets. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping the entire tournament on the men's side as we ended up discussing Alcaraz's convincing win against Medvedev in the final on Sunday. Now it's time to actually get into a brief rant, and I might briefly discuss the women's side because I did not do so for the entire episode. For the women's side, really not going to spend much time on it. You ended up seeing Swiatek basically dominate everybody, and she won comfortably. Props to Sakkari, though, for making an impressive run. You know, the more you watch Goff play, the less you understand how she won a U.S. Open. But either way, Sakkari fired her coach and appeared to regain her form pretty quickly. So props to Sakkari, but unfortunately, Swiatek was too good, and you ended up seeing a bagel in the final set. I believe, if I saw this correctly, the first set of the men's final between Medvedev and Alcaraz, which went to a tiebreaker, took longer than the entire women's final. One set took longer than the entire women's final. Swiatek is just really, really good, and she's the best player in the world. So props to her for winning another Masters 1000 title and for looking dominant as usual. Unfortunately, though, I do have to at least mention a somber piece of news that happened on Monday, because we know that one of Swiatek's biggest rivals is Sabalenka, who did end up losing relatively early in the event. Unfortunately for her, she had a death to somebody close to her, as her boyfriend ended up dying on Monday. Pretty rough circumstances. Thoughts and prayers to Sabalenka and to her family, as well as her boyfriend's family. Rough situation. To be honest, I did not know much about him at the time. I did not know that she was dating somebody who used to be in the NHL, I believe. But either way, point is, Sabalenka's boyfriend ended up dying, and I'm not sure what her status will be for Miami. Tennis is a secondary point here. Point is, hope Sabalenka's okay. Hope that the family's okay, and I hope that either way she's able to go through the proper grieving process and take as long as she needs in order to fully deal with this very sad circumstance in a healthy manner. So wanted to mention that. Of course, unfortunately, I wish I could talk about Sabalenka in a more positive way, but that was the shocking news story for the tennis world on Monday. So sorry for, how everything unfolded there with Sabalenka and her boyfriend, but either way, that sucks. Nothing else more to add there. For the women's tournament, nothing else really to add. You had a couple of very entertaining matches, but Swiatek was really the best player, and it was not very close. She kind of lapped the entire field, and it felt like everybody was fighting for second place, and Sakkari was the winner of the silver medal, so to speak, as she had the right to get her ass kicked by Swiatek in the final. Now, as for my brief rant that I'm going to get into for Indian Wells, a lot of it's going to be biased based on where I'm located on the East Coast, as well as the time difference. I can't stand Indian Wells. I'm really just not an overall fan of that event for a Masters 1000 title. I get that it's nice. I get that it's going to be in California, and I recognize that normally the weather cooperates. This year, not so much. The rain was really annoying to deal with. It felt like we were in Wimbledon, and you just saw a bunch of delayed and postponed matches, which was driving me nuts. The B thing was weird, but it's mostly the time of the matches. They end very late. Time difference is the main reason for that. I've never been a fan of Indian Wells. I probably won't be. It's fine. There are better Masters 1000 events out there. I think Miami's one of them. Still, point is, it was an entertaining tournament for what it was. I'm not a big fan of the actual event, but still, it was a nice overall conclusion. Alcaraz got the job done. Bit of an anticlimactic final. And of course, it was good for us because we did win our best bet from the YouTube video on the final. But if you are curious about the actual payouts for the men's side, I think the women get paid the same. But either way, point is, Alcaraz did make $1.1 million. You saw Medvedev make $585,000. The semifinalists made $325,000. The quarterfinalists made $185,000. The fourth round guys made $101,000. The third round guys made $59,000. $1,100. Second round did make $42,000, and the first round guys did end up making $30,050. You add it all together, or at least based on what I see here on the ATP website, you had over $9 million in prize money. So Masters 1000 events, you can make a lot of money, not just winning Grand Slams. But the point is, Alcaraz picked up a nice payday, and he picked up another nice win to add to his collection. And a reminder, he's still only 21 years old. So Alcaraz is going to be picking up a ton of trophies over the next decade and change. And I wanted to at least mention that Alcaraz did pick up another Masters 1000 title. He's actually 20. I misspoke. So he's actually turning 21 in about 2 months. So a reminder, when Alcaraz does struggle the next time, he ends up going through a bit of a slump. Reminder, he's only 20 years old. So the talent is undeniable. He's going to be a face of tennis in the future. I think him and Sinner will be rivals for a long, long time. But Alcaraz is great, and it seemed like he regained his form, and hopefully he was able to shut up the critics to some degree as he was able to bounce back and pick up another Masters 1000 title. Either way, though, briefly getting into the actual game plan for the next episode, we're back on schedule, going to do a preview and outrights episode for Miami, which should be taking place on Tuesday. There are qualifying matches going on, so we're going to have to hope that the odds are actually posted for the quarters and for the actual outrights. But still, a reminder, Djokovic will not be there. Unfortunate. It is what it is. But either way, we are going to cover the actual tournament, and we will do episodes per round. I know I said I was going to do that for Indian Wells. I got COVID. It happens. It is what it is. I'm healthy enough now to resume the normal schedule, so expect episodes from the tennis podcast for the entire week, basically, and into next week. But either way, until next time, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio, and find me on a bunch of shows at the network, the MLB Show. A reminder that the opening day for baseball is in about 9 days. So we're going to be having baseball episodes basically every weekday, and I will be on a couple of those during the course of the week. A reminder of the NBA Show, I'm on multiple times a week, basically 4 out of the 5 days, I think. But the point is, I'll be back on the NBA Show for Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. So I'll be on the NBA Show. Either way, in order to find me. And until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.